Live from Fairfax, it's the Inside Scoop, Virginia. All the news Virginians want to know. Here's your host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. I'm George Burke. I'm privileged tonight to have two members of the House of Delegates with us. Vivian Watts, who represents the 39th District, which is covers much of Annandale and parts of Springfield, as well as Mark Sickles from the 43rd District. He includes Greater Vanconia, Kingstown, and Northeast Lorton. Welcome. Glad to have you tonight.
Good to be here, George.
Vivian is on the Courts of Justice, Finance, and Science and Technology Committees. Mark is on the Commerce and Labor Committee, the Health, Welfare, and Institutions Committee, and the Privileges and Elections Committee. Both of them have been in the House of Delegates for a while. You served two separate periods of time. Vivian first came on, I believe, in 82 to 85. Then you were the Secretary of Transportation and Public Safety,
That's
I
right,
understand.
yeah.
They're now separated, I believe, correct? And then you were reelected in 96. Mark, you were first elected in 2003, and you've served ever since. So both of you folks have been around. You have rich careers in public service beyond what you have done in the House of Delegates, and plus, I guess the golden issue is it's an election year as of January 1st.
That's right.
Really, as of Election Day. Both of you are up for re-election next year, as is the entire House of Delegates. I personally view this as very important elections for a lot of reasons. We'll get into the budget issues that the state and all states are facing and our nation is facing. It's not unique to Virginia or unique to Fairfax. It's the downturn in the economy is clobbering virtually every jurisdiction in this country and every state in this country. So welcome aboard, and let's get rolling. Vivian, if you could give our viewers just a little bit more of a feel for your background and what you've done.
Okay, who I am. Let me start by saying I was not raised in a political family at all. I have described it to some high school kids as my folks felt there were the doers and the done-tos, and they knew they were the done-tos. And so my involvement when I came here to the Washington area and all of the civic work for about 15 years just evolved, and I was as surprised as anyone, certainly within my family, to find myself running for office. It was the extension of all that civic work. And the shorthand is I've been in for 16 of the last 26 years, which seems like a long span of time. But the 10 years that I was out for, that, as you said, was Secretary of Transportation and Public Safety. I love saying, George, that when I left the job, they split it, and it's been split ever since. I'm the only one who did do it for 4 years, and for the most part, it's taken 2 men to do my job. I had both prisons and pavement, and it was quite an experience.
That's quite a disparity of issues there.
It was. The only thing in common was state police, but I had National Guard. I had, again, all of the transportation department. When Governor Belials was the transportation governor, unfortunately, the last time we've had that kind of a focus.
And it certainly is unfortunate. Everybody who drives our roads every day understands it. And we'll get into some of the reasons why. Mark, it's great to have you back. You've been a guest on this show a couple of times.
I have.
I always love to have you. You got a lot to say, and certainly educate me, and I think our viewers as well. But again, we have some new viewers and the like. Give us a little rundown, a bit of your history, if you would.
Well, George, I guess when I was a young person, I enjoyed keeping up with current affairs and politics, and when I settled in the Franconia area, I was working at Fort Belvoir at the base, which is mostly or partly in my district now. I got involved in campaigns and at a really low level, and then every year, since we do have a chance in Virginia to participate in our democracy every single year, I did more and more and became chair of my local committee, and in the mid-90s became chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. And that was a great experience for 2.5 years. And met a lot of people, and then the time came when I decided to run myself. I had been involved in civic life too. I spent 11 years on the Fairfax County Library Board, learning a lot about really how the Fairfax County government runs just with our own agency. And we're still seeing some of the fruits of the work that we did when I was on the board now, like all the new libraries that have opened recently in Fairfax and the renovations that are just beginning on some of our oldest facilities were things that came out of the capital improvement plan that we worked on when I was there. And I served as president and on the board of United Community Ministries, which is a $3 million social service agency in the South County area for 6 years, and president is 1 year. So all these things together, I decided I could maybe do a little bit more in elected office, and ran. I lost the first time I ran in 2001, a narrow loss, and then came back 2 years later and have won it, and I'm in my third term.
And you've won fairly handily, if I recall.
Well, I didn't have an opponent last year, which was fortunate, I guess, in some sense. But I think having an opponent sometimes keeps you sharp. So.
But I also think it's partially a credit to the type of work you do and the service you do.
Well, we try to keep active. I really enjoy, my constituents and being out there with the public, and enjoy going to the school play, which I did the other night to see Fiddler on the Roof at Edison. And it was such a great show. I would recommend it to all of our people across Fairfax County to check out high school theater. It's remarkable in our county.
Particularly high school theater in your district, is I think
it's really good, yeah. And our sports programs, and just keeping up with what people are doing.
Well, we have we just came off of a pretty historic election. Both of you are Democrats. I am too. I don't make any bones about it on this show. And we elected a Democratic president. We elected a second Democratic U.S. senator. We now have 2 in Virginia, which has been a while, I think, since that's been the case. We reversed the majority of the congressional delegation. It's now 6-5 Democrat, as long as the Perriello race holds up in the 5th district against Virgil Goode. It looks like it's going to. And last year we won the Senate by one extra senator to make it a majority. It's a tenuous majority at 21, and Fairfax played a role in that as well. George Barker is
he's my senator.
21,
and mine too,
and a great one at that. I've had George on this show several times. He actually did a show on Channel 10 for a while, and he's extraordinarily knowledgeable.
He was someone we always went to for advice on healthcare issues in particular before he got elected.
So now what we have left is the House of Delegates, and there is I believe a 6-seat Republican majority at this point. And there are a lot of folks who are clicking their heels, saying after last year's victories and the like, it could be a cakewalk. I tend to disagree. It's a different electorate who will be out there voting this time, and we need to have good candidates in those seats and see what we can do. It's of particular importance, I think, to some of us because of the whole process of congressional redistricting, which takes place after the 2010 census. We also have a gubernatorial race next year that I suspect will be very spirited. It always, if history proves right, generally after a president of one party is elected, the following year we have an election, and often a governor of the other party is elected.
For the last 30 years.
Yeah, we have to see whether we can break that cycle this time. I think that our Democratic governors, both Warner and Kane, have represented us well, and hopefully the voters will see that accordingly. But let's get down to the issues at hand. Delegate Watts, you are on the Finance Committee, and you were just down in Roanoke. I was reading an article today from one of the papers about the dire message that was being presented down there, and I guess there was another meeting of senators that took place in Fredericksburg after that as well, and they came up with pretty much the same conclusions. We're facing a budget deficit that looks like it's going to be over $3 billion. How do we deal with it? And I'll throw that out to both of you. You guys can run with it for about 3.5 minutes, and I'll just listen.
Unfortunately, it's an ongoing challenge. we saw some of the economic problems start to shape up as early as spring of '07. And so in the budget that we approved in this session, as in the '08 session, we were quite conservative. The typical revenue growth is around 6%. We passed a budget that was only looking at about a 2.2% increase. But even with that conservative look, by July and August, and I was tracking the figures, so even before the news of September burst onto the scene, in July and August, our income tax collections, as well as our sales tax and of course our gasoline tax collections, were below a year ago. It wasn't that they weren't increasing but by a little bit. They were actually had fallen from what they were a year ago. So that when the all of the federal news then heaped it on, and as you say, almost all of the states, with the exception of Alaska and a few states that have that kind of...
They've got a piggy bank
they've got a natural asset there that many of the rest of us are paying for. But anyway,
they also have a population that's half the size of Fairfax.
Right. But back to the point, the governor can only cut. He can't shift money. So he made an announcement in the first part of October that there would be significant hiring freezes of 600 positions. Over 500 positions would be cut. These were not empty positions. So in addition to the 600, we cut another 500 by gubernatorial action. That's advantageous in that those actions will carry into the next fiscal year. So you've already made some of the cuts just by cutting back those positions. But essentially what the governor did was propose about $900 million to balance the budget to the degree that he could. We have another $1.5 billion. I meant to say billion the first time. We have another $1.5 billion to do in the budget year, the fiscal year that starts July 1, which will be the 2010 budget year. We have to take at least another $1.5 billion out there. Many indicate that it'll be higher than that. Again, we all listen to the stock market and all of the other economic news nightly. I don't think I have listened to so many commentators in my adult life as I have in the last 3 months, trying to get a better understanding of what's happening.
My personal opinion, based on what I've read and what I've seen, is that we've got another year or two of this downturn
I would
before the ship is righted. I don't envy Governor Kane. I don't envy Barack Obama in terms of how they are going to cope with this, and whether or not the public's going to understand that you don't turn a ship around, on a dime. It takes miles of coasting to do that.
Before turning it over to Mark to add something, the other huge difference, though, between the state and Barack Obama is that we cannot print money.
Correct.
So much of what you're hearing about the stimulus packages of multi-billions, we don't have that option. We have to balance our budget within the existing revenue coming in.
When we're back, we'll be back in 2 minutes, and we'll hear from Mark Sickles. Feel free to phone us at 571-749-1166.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing. No. Of 127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
Who pays paying for that? Commercial.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. My guests today are two veteran legislators, Delegate Mark Sickles, Delegate Vivian Watts. Right now, we're talking about the budget. Mark, what are you guys going to do?
Well, it is bleak, George, as we were just saying. The president is putting together now a stimulus package that we could read about in the newspaper this morning. And one of the things that's probably going to be in there is a bailout for the states, because we bailed out the financial institutions and we may do something for the automobile industry, but right now the states are in such poor condition, many in lots worse shape than Virginia is, and it doesn't make any sense when we've got 1 million people that have lost their jobs this year and maybe 1.5 million more that are going to lose their jobs next year to also lay off state and local employees. And in Virginia, a lot of our spending comes down to local government, and local government actually implements the programs that we do. And we have a pretty conservative budget in many ways. The only area of spending in Virginia that we're at the national average, like 25th on, is corrections. We have 35,000 plus people in prison, and that's very expensive. But if you take Medicaid...
You're saying we have a lot of hanging judges?
You do not want to commit a crime in this state. We have Medicaid, that's 16% of our budget, public safety and corrections, K through 12 education, which is around 35%, and higher education, which is about 11 or 12%. The governor in this year has already cut higher ed 5%, and I'm really concerned about that for our parents in Northern Virginia. Almost all of our kids go to college. Many of them go to public colleges and universities in Virginia, and the tuition is going up, and it wasn't the most inexpensive state to attend a school in to begin with. So that is something that concerns me. In our state employees, unlike the federal government, where every year we can read how the Congress takes care of a cost of living increase for federal employees, we don't get that for our state employees. They sometimes can go through years without getting an increase, and I think that this may happen to them again this year, no increase. And so it is hard. We don't pay a lot. People come up to Northern Virginia in our state police force, for instance, and they get a 10% or so, a little bit more differential, but
closer to 20 actually.
20% differential, but that really doesn't cover the cost of living to being in our area, George. So we have some challenges in front of us here, and of course, as Delegate Watts mentioned, our gas tax revenue is not coming in, and that's one of the dedicated fees that pays for transportation. Our sales tax, 0.5% on the sales tax goes into the transportation spending area as well, and with sales down, so that hurts us being able to build roads that we need to build in our area altogether. And we can't get a transportation program through. We've been trying real hard. Hopefully after this next set of elections coming up this fall, we'll have 51 votes to pass a good bill like Senator Saslaw's bill that we had before us in June. It failed.
I hope so.
Mark's covered a great deal. Let me just come in behind on a couple of things. One, when I look at the potential of an economic stimulus package coming out of the federal government on infrastructure, I know Virginia is one state that is ready to go because of all the cuts that we have had to make on transportation. Given the fact that we haven't done anything with our infrastructure funding for over 20 years, The result is that, for example, this year, at the beginning of the calendar year, we knew the revenue was coming down. So I'm trying to remember, I think we took out close to a third of the projects that were on the 6-year plan, and then we've had to cut still again. So all of those projects, many of them ready to go, right of way there, design work done, you're ready to go to bid. So if we had part of the economic stimulus package going to infrastructure, certainly in transportation, there are a number of projects that we would be absolutely ready to put people to work and also address this very significant need that we have. And one other thing to pick up on, one of the battles that we have to fight again and again as Northern Virginians is this perception in K through 12 funding that Northern Virginia can just handle everything on their own and you don't need any state help. Well, Fairfax County, because of a number of factors, the last time they did a survey, approximately 2002, we had larger class sizes, average class sizes, at every single grade level, kindergarten through seniors in high school, than all but 25 other school divisions in the state. We get very, very little from the state because supposedly we have the wealth to handle it. Well, unfortunately, we only have the real estate tax. So while we technically, and by the way, that wealth measure always lags 2 years behind, so it doesn't reflect today's economy, the amount that we get is always factored in that way. So that the reason I bring that up, one of the battles that we're going to have to fight hard, as we did the last session, is the attempt by members elsewhere in the state to take away our very modest cost of living differential that we get for teachers. And I say very modest because it all goes through this very complex ability to pay formula, and when it's all calculated out, we're getting less than a 2% differential. So that's why I highlighted that state police have always gotten over a 20% differential, because it's documented that that is what the difference of cost of living is here versus the rest of the state. But that will be under severe attack, mostly because there's a lack of understanding of the formula, and we seem to be a target. We have 25% of the votes, but we don't have 51% of the votes.
You know, it's even a lot of people up here, I don't think they understand. In some ways, even our own residents here in Fairfax don't fully understand the extent of the recession either. I mean, this is probably the wealthiest enclave in the nation, this crescent of Northern Virginia.
It's probably it's probably not hurting us as badly here as
but
in some
it is
other parts of the
impacting us.
state.
I see the foreclosure signs. I see the Washington Post has 2 or 3 pages of classifieds for jobs on Sunday when it used to be 20 pages.
One of my touchstones has always been the observation that a man drowned in a stream whose average depth was 4 feet. And that's what you're having. When you have no flexibility but the real estate tax, you have a lot of people who are hurting very, very badly, and you can't make a differential between those who can absorb and those who cannot absorb. They're on the margins. And certainly with foreclosures, the mortgage rates, these are all serious problems.
And, but you know, I can see folks from other parts of the state coming up and seeing what looks like a booming economy. I mean, at least we're blessed with federal contractors and many jobs that deal with high tech and deal with the federal government. It gives us a little bit of a cushion. But I certainly can see between the cracks that we have a lot of issues relative to the recession. I mean, you can even see it in the stores and like. But then it may not be as bleak as it is in a Danville or a Martinsville, et cetera. But it's different. It also, people look, if you look straight at salaries or income levels, it's not an appropriate thing to look at because of the amount of real estate taxes people pay up here and what you pay for products. It's absolutely more expensive, as you said, to live up here by a long stretch. People come from other parts of the country to work for Congress or as members of Congress, and when they move into Northern Virginia or Montgomery County, and even the district for that matter, they're shocked. They're shocked at how much everything costs. And so it's all relative in that respect, but I certainly am very hopeful that we can increase our Democratic representation within the House of Delegates and address some of these matters up here. And there are some potential for some seats to flip here in Northern Virginia, I hope. Let's get back to the budget a little bit more before we get to the half break. How is it going to impact education? How are these budget cuts going to impact education?
Well, the governor has not touched either education or Medicaid, but as Mark was pointing out, it makes up such a substantial part of our budget that we can't possibly balance it without looking at some aspect of it. So again, this is why we'll be totally on guard about changes in the formula that aren't justified, and particularly permanent changes where the attempt is made to shortchange this area even further than it has been. So we'll be that will be on the table. Medicaid, at the briefing that I attended in Roanoke, I was really quite disturbed because Medicaid, we're 48th in the nation in our per person expenditures on Medicaid. Very, very tight. We hardly do anything above the federal minimum. This is a shared program, typically 50-50. And yet we were getting staff presentations that said, there are providers that are overpaid. Well, certainly, again, in this area, when you do try to get any kind of help to stay in the home rather than move on to the extraordinary expense, as well as a lot of other issues that go with finally going into a nursing home, that most people want to keep their independence. Well, the Medicaid coverage of services makes it virtually impossible to get that kind of home services, and issues that have to do with the disabled, issues that have to do with people who are in assisted living because they can't live on their own, who may have been in a motorcycle accident. I mean, there are a number of different circumstances that are all part of the Medicaid picture, and Medicaid has gone up over 115% at the same time that the budget only went up 49% in the last decade. So the pressure that we have on Medicaid and medical funding is a very serious challenge that we have to deal with.
George, we recently met with the superintendent of schools, and he's looking at higher class sizes. That's what it boils down to when you get to it. They only about 7 or 8% of the Fairfax County school system is in administration outside of schools, and they'll be looking at that even more. We all want to get the resources into the classroom as much as possible.
We'll open it up right after the break. I want to get back to this school issue with you, Mark. And we shall return in 2 minutes.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose to save.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. I have two Fairfax County delegates with me today, Delegate Vivian Watts, Delegate Mark Sickles. Right now we're talking about the budget. Mark, when I so rudely interrupted you for a break, we were talking about the schools, and you had talked about how you folks recently met with the school superintendent.
Right. Well, it's going to be
Jack Dale, right?
Jack Dale.
Fairfax, yeah.
Yep. The cuts are going to be the first time that we've actually seen slashes from the year before and not cuts to the increases that you might have. I mean, our school system is growing again. We grew real fast and we topped off for a couple of years. Now we're growing again. And people are leaving private schools because they can't afford the tuition in this economy, and they're coming into the public schools. And so the classrooms are getting more crowded, and we're not going to be able to give them as much money. Now, how much the state cuts from K through 12 is going to be a big issue in Richmond this winter. So far, the governor has not cut anything.
Explain a little bit about, for our viewers, how schools are financed. I mean,
well, it's a little complicated.
That's because I don't fully understand it.
It's probably the most complicated thing that we do. There are standards of quality that the state mandates on the system, and essentially the state is committed to pay for 55% of these standards of quality. So now they're looking at changing some of the standards of quality so the state can get off the hook a little bit on some of those. But even though it says 55%, that doesn't mean we get 55%. It goes through what's called the local composite index, which is based on the value of real estate in your jurisdiction and your income in your jurisdiction. Arlington and Alexandria are the top. Fairfax County is just a little bit beyond that, and the way the formula works, you can't go beyond 0.8 or 80%. We pay for 80% of the standards of quality in Fairfax. A very poor jurisdiction in a rural area or an inner city might pay less than 20% or around 20%. So that's how it moves over the scale. And when people say we're not getting our money back from Richmond, generally they're speaking about the education, K through 12 education part. You know, we do well with other things like the higher education. A lot of our kids are attending higher education universities that are public around the state. And we also do well on the car tax. Some people forget that the car tax is actually an appropriation. The tax never went away. We are paying it through your sales tax and income taxes back to the jurisdictions to cover that lower tax bill that we have. We froze it a couple years ago in that major budget deal at $950 million. So we're spending about $1 billion a year back to the jurisdictions to cover your share of the tax on your annual tax on your car.
Unless you don't pay it on time, and then they wallop you with the whole thing, I heard.
Probably do some more. So I know there's some people that want to mess with that, but this is a place where Northern Virginians get most of the benefit. So we tend to drive more expensive cars and later model cars that have a higher book value, and most of the money comes here. Now, because it's been frozen per jurisdiction, it was at 70%. It's a little bit less than that now, like 68.
You had mentioned that there were a couple of other things you wanted to talk about in terms of that Medicaid issue.
Medicaid, you know, Vivian was talking about how conservative and thrifty our program is. You have to be less than poverty to qualify, the federal poverty level. And we had gotten that up a little bit, and that may be something you asked what might change. We may have to make it harder to get Medicaid benefits, and we're already one of the hardest places to qualify. Medicaid pays for nursing home care. That's not something that you get through Medicare, and the state pays half, the federal government pays half. And right now you have to be really sick to be able to qualify to get Medicaid funding. A lot of people, of course, go into the Medicaid program once they're in a nursing home and they go through all their assets, and then at one point they switch onto the Medicaid program. So there's a lot of places you can cut there that hurt people.
Mental health is one area that's probably going to be hit with some cuts.
Unfortunately, following the Virginia Tech tragedy, we finally did much overdue work in mental health. A number of us who had followed it closely for years had various reasons for intense involvement. Were again frustrated that we were at the bottom in the nation in this, not only the criticality of preventing human suffering, but also the prevention of that circle moving out and taking innocence into it. We had 40 new positions in part of our reform. We went through, now this was one time when, in recent years, when I felt extremely privileged to be part of a hard-working bipartisan group. We met during session in addition to the commissions that had also met before session. We met for well over 40 very intense hours. I remember one night, 6 hours with pizza until midnight, until we felt we'd considered every aspect we needed to consider. With that also came the budgeting, because if you're going to have accountability, if you're going to make sure that somebody who is judged to be a potential danger is in fact getting the services that they need, you have to have the staffing that goes with that. So we had added 40 positions. Obviously, that's a major concern about holding those positions. In addition to that, I think there's a much greater awareness, fortunately, in our returning service people and what they have gone through. This has always been the case. It's not always been acknowledged, but it's even more so with the conditions of the theaters of war in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and in particular, the constant redeployment, particularly of Guard and reservists who do not go back to the support of a base, but who also are not given enough time to be able to absorb the trauma that they have gone through before they're back into it again. And we're seeing a much higher incident, not only, of course, in traumatic brain injury because of the terrorist activity in the war, but also post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, I mentioned this with mental health. It's not just the VA. It's not just the federal government, although fortunately I've been on the Veteran Services Board since Governor Warner restructured all of our veteran services. Surprisingly, Virginia was doing much less than most states do for veterans. But it's not enough that the VFW or American Legion help each other get through all the red tape and get your VA benefits that you're entitled to. That's long gone. And in fact, only 20% of those who apply for VA veterans benefits, their application is even accepted, not to mention the benefits that they might be entitled to. So we are doing significantly more with that, but with looking at the benefits that these individuals should be entitled to, who in many cases desperately need, if we're not going to continue that ripple effect of domestic violence and drug and alcohol abuse, problems of employment. All of these things can be prevented with good community health services being available. And this is another one of those areas in the budget that we have finally come to a realization of its importance. And then here we are in the middle of a time when there's going to be severe cuts potentially made.
Hey, Mark, you have you butt right up against Belvoir.
Yes, sir. Well, I have North Post is in my district.
So you're dealing with that whole BRAC issue, as long as we're talking about military issues.
Well, we are actually in Vivian's district.
Actually, I have all of the engineering proving grounds.
We have
solidly in my
8,500
district.
people coming right across the street from my district in Vivian's district, and we're building the missing link of the Fairfax County Parkway to serve that area, but there are 4 intersections that everybody agrees we need to move people in and out of there, and only 2 of them are funded. And so we're in a problem. They're looking for money to fix those last 2. In my area, Telegraph Road is a 2-lane road that backs up on the backside of Fort Belvoir. It is a massive parking lot in rush hour. And we've been in the 6-year plan twice in my 5 years in the General Assembly and been taken out. And so I don't know what we're going to do. It's a desperate situation. that we got to just keep working on until we can find a solution to it. If we get a statewide fix, this will be a top priority. I know that. We've got a couple of other key projects too that are ongoing, and so we have got the brunt of it. We are going to have a state-of-the-art $800 million hospital, the Fort Belvoir Community Hospital, which will replace Walter Reed to a large extent, and a place where wounded soldiers can go to rehabilitate themselves. And it's going to be beautiful buildings. They're under construction now. You can see them from Route 1 as you drive
The
by.
reality on this whole road issue as it relates to BRAC, one of the things that makes it so difficult is you've got federal/military involvement as well as state involvement, and to a degree county involvement.
And what's so difficult with the Army's involvement is that they have rules and standards that every time I have talked with them, and I've talked with them a great deal in various settings, you come right up against precedent nationwide. That if we do it for you, we're going to have to do it in Indiana.
And
we're going to have to
she's really
do it in
talking about,
Nebraska.
like, doing it off base.
And what we're dealing with is that they're looking at, unless all of this activity increases traffic by a certain percentage, they have no obligation off base. Well, I'm sorry, in Northern Virginia, to increase it by the same percentages that might be true outside in Des Moines, Iowa, is a whole different standard that ought to be applied, but we have not been able to get any budging on this at all. So all they will obligate themselves to is what they call direct bolt-on, which means something that directly services the base, but not anything about the traffic that moves into the base, particularly on the Fullerton Road problem of as the parkway goes across EPG, because we can't afford the intersection that we need. We're going to have UPS trucks and Costco traffic and all of the many industrial uses of that Fullerton Industrial Park will have to go out to unimproved 2-lane rolling road for about a quarter of a mile before they come back onto an interchange onto the parkway. Again, it's just accidents waiting to happen. It makes no rational sense, but there is no money from any source. We're trying to make sure that every penny we can, we keep for that project so that we can at least build some portion of that essential interchange that has been left off. But even a portion of it isn't the real solution.
I hope there's some opportunity, George, with what the President's going to do in infrastructure investment to target this area, because BRAC really is a disaster in many ways, but also a great opportunity for us. In my neck of the woods, we lost a really potential great investment by not using the GSA warehouse site that are right on top of the Metro Center and the VRE station. And the government just couldn't make it happen by 2011, and we didn't have the leadership at the top that it would have taken to make that happen. So it was an opportunity, and now we're going to have more cars on 395 all the way up to Seminary Road to get off.
So these are the contracts that are ready to go if we just had the funding.
When I understand the frustration with the military, but the military has rules and it's
Oh,
one
they
size
do.
fits all, and,
That's
and
right.
there's no change in them. I mean, it's a massive process to internal change on their part before you can affect any change from the outside. Sometimes I think the voters and the residents in those areas don't fully understand how the military can stymie something, and even if the commander wants to help, his hands are tied in some instances.
And the commander has been excellent.
We're going to be back in 2 minutes. Please hang in there with you, and we'll see you then.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. My guests today are Delegate Mark Sickles and Delegate Vivian Watts. They'll be going back to Richmond very shortly after the first of the year for our legislative session. And we've been talking predominantly about the budget. But Mark, you are chairing a new joint subcommittee on biotechnology. Tell us about that. That's like a hot issue these days. The whole biotechnology.
It is. The world is changing. The life sciences are booming, and Virginia needs to be playing a bigger role in that. Almost every state that surround us has a more strategic approach and are doing things to attract scientists and keep them there, and especially in this life science area. Of course, this is Maryland's strong point. They've
the 270 Carter.
270 Carter. They have Johns Hopkins in their state. North Carolina, their legislature appropriates about $100 million a year for the biosciences, and they have it concentrated there in the Research Triangle. And many, many years ago, they had foresight to do that when they knew that tobacco and furniture and their basic industries, textiles, were going away, and they did that, and it's paying off for them in spades. We have a lot going on at our universities, but we're going to have, through our joint subcommittee, come up with the 2 bills that are really important that I think have a good chance to pass, that aren't too expensive. I think that we'll be able to get through the General Assembly this winter. One is to correct and reform our angel investor tax credit that we have now, that I won't go into the detail for it, but it is inadequate, and it's being not used for the purposes it was intended to when Jim Scott got it passed a little over 10 years ago.
For an economic illiterate like me, though, at least explain in layman's terms what it does.
It gives you a tax credit on when you have a small business and you're in certain areas, so it will help you be able to create capital and reinvest. It draws people into investing into companies that have a little bit higher risk, because the reward would be a little higher as well. And we have a $3 million cap on it. The last several years, it's authorized to be $5 million. But everyone who puts in a proposal now gets their share of it if they meet the criteria. And the way the statute was written, it tells what cannot be funded by it, and they forgot to put in restaurants, for instance. So a lot of the people that are using this tax credit are new restaurants coming up in Virginia. And in Maryland, you may have seen a story in the Washington Post last year about when they have a similar tax credit, if you qualify, you get a certain amount, but it doesn't go out equally to everybody. So if you have more people that qualify, you split $3 million in Virginia to a smaller degree. They camp out on the sidewalk in Annapolis to get this program and get approved by their system, and it really works well for them. They've got people trying to come there, and it's refundable in Maryland too, which we don't have it. You can invest in a Maryland company that's located in Maryland, and they'll send you a check to Virginia. You don't actually have to live there and pay taxes in Maryland. So that's one thing that they're doing to try to steal scientists from other states. There are other things we're doing to try to match our research money, the little research money we do spend in Virginia, to people and scientists in our universities that have drawn down federal grants. And we do pretty well at that in Virginia at our big PhD granting universities. But other states are using that to attract scientists away too. They'll say, look, if you can get federal money, we will pay you X, we'll match it. And we're going to set up a system that does something like that to the degree we can afford it.
Is there talk about developing a research triangle or a 270 corridor or anything like that in Virginia, and where that would be? I mean, we have our high-tech corridor, which is the Dulles corridor.
That's a good question.
Fairfax.
Because Old Dominion and VCU and the medical campus in Richmond and UVA and Virginia Tech and George Mason are all in different places, it's highly unlikely that we would have that. George Mason is in their Prince William campus focusing on life sciences. That's where American Type Culture located. They've got 500 or 600 employees there now, and George Mason has been given a big grant for bioscience defense, and they are going to build that and use that campus to be the focus of this area. We're also going to help them, hopefully, this language, to be able to attract wet lab space where scientists they can't afford their own building yet, that you can go in and have the right temperature, no vibration, clean air, recirculated air, everything you need in a high production, white, clean environment. We don't have enough of that in Northern Virginia, and our scientists sometimes have to go over to Maryland to get that. We're going to do some things, we hope, to help developers finance that in the private sector.
Good. We could. That's high-paying industry.
High-paying, and it's the future.
And it's the future.
Yeah.
But it's not easily done technology, and it does take time. It goes directly to the issues of alternative fuels. We have the richness of our coal fields. We have the Chesapeake Bay. There are opportunities out of ODU, out of tech, a lot of good research work that can be done. We have the potential for much more responsible use of natural resources with this kind of biotech. So it's not just medical. There are many other applications.
It surprises me we don't have more of it, given the caliber of our universities. I mean, we have an excellent university system that can match any university system in the nation.
We don't have a university in the state that's in the top 50 for research, though. And Virginia Tech comes close, but we need to spend more in that. Other states are doing it, and that's where our future jobs are going to be. They're not going to be probably manufacturing widgets in the future. So one other thing I wanted to mention, George, is the governor is going to focus on climate change and environment and energy in this session of the General Assembly. I don't know exactly what his proposals are going to be. He's putting that together now. He's had a Global Climate Change Commission that has been working and have just given him some ideas and reports. Now, the legislature last year, Senator Mary Margaret Whipple had a bill passed that created on our side, on the legislative branch, an Environment and Energy Commission, and the Speaker appointed me to it, so I've been attending the meetings and getting up to speed on this, and we are going to have some proposals there too. We'll see how we do on this, because the greatest conservation effort we've seen lately is the $4 a gallon gas that we had earlier, 5 months ago, and now the regular gas is back to under $2 a gallon now. It'll be interesting to see if we can maintain this momentum. The new president wants our country to become energy independent, but it's really going to be hard to do that when we have this very, very inexpensive fuel that we're relying on.
The reason the Europeans all drive cars with smaller cars and many diesels and the like is because basically they're all taxed on horsepower. Is how they do it. They don't even do it on fuel. Of course, their tax rate on fuel is sky high, and it always has been. But they view it as a tax on horsepower.
I say in my area, when the gas prices were real high, I could tell the number of bus ridership grew enormously, and I I think people got in the habit and they found out it wasn't such a bad thing to do, and I still see people on the buses, so I'm happy about that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think people are jumping back in their cars quite as much. They're still, I mean, some like me immediately went to smaller cars and learned it's real nice to get 30 miles to a gallon.
That's right. That's
And I think others are feeling the same way. And I think particularly here in Northern Virginia, we understand that this is the low gas prices are only temporary. Something's going to occur that's going to raise those prices again.
And we don't want to get stuck like we did last time.
Because it caught us by surprise, caught us with our pants down.
But all of that transit usage, which has not gone back down, which we are delighted about on one hand, but on the other hand, we have an aging system. And once again, we come back to the need to put money into that system to repair tracks, to have enough cars so that you have full 8-car trains, so that you make the kind of technological improvements needed to have the appropriate deadheading to make better use of this investment that we have in Metro, as well as buses and feeder buses, and all of these aspects are all very important parts of funding this infrastructure. So while it is energy saving, it is not necessarily public investment saving. We still have to invest to realize these improvements to our environmental footprint.
There are some folks across the river who still complain that Virginia is playing tiddlywinks with their share of the Metro funding in terms of...
That's another program.
One of the things I like to do, and we're really running out of time, but I'd like to give, starting with Mark, I'd like to give you each just 30 seconds. I know it's early, and I promise I'm going to have you on the show again.
Perfect.
But it is, we are now into the election cycle. About 20 or 30 seconds just to do a quick synopsis on why the voters should support you in your reelection.
George, I think that they have elected somebody in my district who's willing to go to battle for them on the biggest problems affecting their day-to-day life, and that's transportation. And I wish I could say that today we solved all the problems. You know, we passed a bill a year or so ago that the major provision was struck down by the Supreme Court. We still have some remnants of that bill that are helping us, and but it's not nearly enough. When I explain this issue to the public about the need for new revenue, nobody disputes this. We have allowed inflation to erode our purchasing power of our dedicated transportation resources. And that's my #1 concern, is to fixing transportation in Northern Virginia. So I hope the voters will send me back to keep working on that.
Vivian, I'm running out of time, so now I have to promise to have you back.
Oh, perfect then. Absolutely perfect.
I'll have you back on another show. I apologize. Television is all about time, and sometimes I don't manage it as well as I should. Again, my guests today were Delegate Mark Sickles, Delegate Vivian Watts, both veteran legislators, and we were glad to have them. Thanks for watching.